It's like everything is caring for everything. You can feel the birth and the rebirth of the universe itself. So as we were talking earlier about birth, death, and rebirth, but that's at the individual. You can actually feel the birth, death, and rebirth of the universe itself. You can feel the pain and the pleasure that this mother energy is experiencing in this moment. So as it's giving birth, it gives birth, it dies to itself, it reborns to itself, gives birth, dies to itself, reborn into itself consistently. And this thing loves itself so much to the point that it's willing to do that out of sacrifice for its own self.
Welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds.
Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities Podcast. My name is Garrett and I'm back today with my guest from last week, Morgan O. Smith. I would suggest going back, if you've just come across this video, I would suggest going back and watching the previous interview I did with Morgan, because we talked about his journey. So that'll give you a lot more background on him. Today, we're going to kind of compare notes on the different stages of awakening and enlightenment, because we had a really fascinating conversation last week and we've been texting back and forward on Telegram and we decided to do another talk. So Morgan, really pleasure to have you back again. Really enjoyed your exciting podcast with me last week. It was great. Thanks so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. Pleasure. Yeah. How's everything going out there in the UK? That's where you are, right?
I'm
Currently,
in Ireland. I'm in Ireland.
You're in
Yeah.
Ireland.
So
Okay.
yeah. We last week's podcast was very exciting. You have a great way of talking about the stages and how they happened and how they unfolded for you. So, I mean, where would you like to start today? We were just having a brief conversation before we started, and we're going to kind of explain the map, and also explain that the map is not the territory. Like, a lot of people confuse the maps for the territory. So we're going to kind of get into that today and speak about it. And yeah. So.
Perfect. Go ahead, lead the way, I guess. I don't know where to.
Well,
As soon
I
as
guess
the cameras go and everything go on, I'm like, but feel free, go for it. I'll follow your lead.
Well, I guess we've both gone through the stages. You know, I sat listening to your story last week, and you know, people probably couldn't see, but my head was nodding the whole way through. You know, listening to how you described them. So I mean, let's go back to like the basic levels. You know, first of all, people are in ignorance, right? They're fully identified as a separate individual. They identify with their ego, their mind, their emotions. So do you want to talk a little bit about that first, Morgan, and we'll kind of bounce it back and forward, them ideas.
That would be like people's everyday state. 99 point whatever percent of the world's population, as you said, separate egos, the labels that are attached to the egos. And of course, when you're an ego, you're attached to these labels, like I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, I'm a coworker, I'm a good person, I'm a good citizen, I contribute to society, I have rules, I have morals, I have ethics, things like that. And a lot of those things are just nice, regular things that you're supposed to do. But of course, you have the flip side of that when you're attached to something saying, I am a father, and of course, if you have a child that dies or something happens to the child, father is affected by that. And that's part of life. That's just human nature. That's how it is. But the thing is that if you're so attached to it and you really believe that this reality is the true reality, that could be the root of your suffering, because everything is dukkha, right? So as the Buddha talks about, so because everything is dukkha, meaning everything is there's a lack of satisfaction and things of that sort. Anything that happens that you're attached to that affects the thing you're attached to will affect you deeply in the negative way. And that's human nature. There's no way around that unless you can become liberated, and then there's less of that suffering or that dukkha that's taking place.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is we form a sense of identity, a sense of I-ness, and that I-ness extends out to objects, friends, relationships, identities, and then we sort of like bring them under that umbrella of us. This is mine. This is me. I'm a separate entity, and these are mine. And it could be even a car or a property or land.
Yeah.
And we sort of put that under the umbrella of me and mine, right? And if anything attacks
And
them, it's
mine.
also an attack on us.
And there's also me versus them. I
Yep.
am this, or we are this, and they are that, and we are not that. So all these separations, divisions, and all of that. So this
And
Dukkha thing becomes very complex.
yeah, and that can form gangs. It could,
It can form
clubs, race. Yeah,
race, gender,
identities. Yeah, yeah, totally.
go down the list. Even if it comes to companies, my company versus your company. My
Yeah,
company is better than your company, or my town's better than your town. The list goes on, and it has their benefits within
vegans.
that. But of course, vegans versus
Yeah,
non-vegans, and
vegans.
the
Yeah,
list goes on.
yeah, yeah. So it's us versus them. It's okay,
Yeah,
okay. So this is what we would call ignorance, right? This is most of the planet,
yeah, not knowing,
99.99% of the planet not
ignorance, not
knowing,
knowing. Yeah,
and it's nobody's fault, right? It's everybody's
the
doing
way
the
it is,
best
the
they
way it's designed.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So
majority of the
what
times, people are doing the best
happens?
they can.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is,
So
within all this ignorance, within all this division and all that, there's a lot of great that comes out of it too. Because if you didn't have these divisions, you couldn't come up with comedy, you couldn't come up with drama, you couldn't come up with competition and all these things. It's just the problem is that we get so immersed in that we don't even realize that the whole time there's a play that's happening. You're so caught up in the play that it causes your sufferings. It's kind of like, just imagine if an actor is playing a role, but the actors start to believe that they're the character that they're playing. It would cause a lot of suffering if the actor fell into the illusion that they're the character. But once the character realizes, oh, no, I'm just Tom Cruise acting the character, the suffering goes away. All right? All the drama and all that stuff that's happening, no,
yeah,
that's just part of the play. But if you're in it and not realizing it's a play, that is hell. That's hell on earth. So it's about waking up and realizing that the whole time you're just the character. And from your divine self, you play out these characters because they're fun to play. This problem is we get attached to them, which is also part of the play. And it's our job is to get to a point in our lives, that our so-called lives, where we actually wake up and realize the truth, the real reality of what's really happening, so that you can now play the play consciously, out of the ignorance. You
mm,
just play the play with pure awareness.
yeah. So it kind of reminds me of there was a Jim Carrey
The
documentary.
Truman
Yeah,
Show.
you know this one, not the Truman Show, also the
Which
Truman
one?
Show, but there's another one where he took on the character. He was playing the character in this movie, and became him. Like he literally all his
Andy
life.
Kaufman. Andy Kaufman, Man on the Moon.
Yes, yes,
Man on the
yes,
Moon. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was it. That was it. And
yeah, yeah.
and he got so into that character that I actually think it forced him into a kind of an awakening where he realized that the character he was playing wasn't actually real, but he had taken it on and was making people believe that's
Mm.
who he was.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah,
People found it awkward. I think Dave Chappelle was talking about that, meeting him, but he met him in the character and he just thought it was, what the hell's going on here? This is strange. But the whole time he was playing the
yeah.
character and probably just really getting caught up in the character.
So that's really what we are, right? We're something greater than our individual forms, believing and acting out that we are the character, right? I think firstly what happens is we're born into a family, right? And the family give us a name and an identity and we grow up
Hmm.
and we just evolve into this character,
Oh
right? We're
yeah.
playing it,
You live
but we
you live by
yeah,
that name, by that character. Yeah.
yeah, and we never stop and question who is that? Who put that individual in charge of us, which is the ego, right?
Yeah. And also it feels so real, right? Because you have your five senses, or maybe your 21 senses because there's more than the five, but it feels so real. So here you have these individuals, your caregivers, who are not just conditioning you, but they're giving you all your basic needs, and so that you can survive. So they're feeding you, putting shelter over your head, they give you clothes, all that stuff. So from that standpoint, from childhood, you're becoming very dependent on that family that says that you are the Smith family. And this is what the
Yeah,
Smith family does. And this is what we don't live by. And this is what we do live by. We don't like those people because we're not like them, and so on and so on and so on. So you get so attached to this identity because it also feels so real. You're feeling the breeze on your face. You taste your taste buds are open. You can taste different foods. You enter into different cultures, or into a culture. You enter into a social circle. You make friends. You find a girlfriend. She probably becomes your wife. you raise children, you have grandchildren, the list goes on and on and on. It feels so real, right? So the question is now, how do you break out of that? Because this ignorance runs so deep. And of course, that's the human experience, but it runs so deep, but hardly anyone realizes that there's something much more than that. So, yeah.
So it seems to be like the perfect setup to force us into making decisions, right? Right decisions
Mm,
over wrong decisions. And somehow, right, there seems to be a feedback mechanism, right? That when we start acting from a place of love, we kind of get something kind of comes back and we feel warm. We get this sort of inner compass and guidance versus, if we act out of ignorance or we act in a mean way, we kind of, our conscience kind of lets us know. So there's something behind it as well, trying to drive us to make the right decisions. So eventually, I guess, lifetime after lifetime, because a lot of times we don't get this in the very first life. It takes multiple cycles.
takes multiple lifetimes before you start to get it. Probably in each lifetime, there's something that you do get, so you get to graduate to to that next level. But it takes lifetime after lifetime to really get to the point where you can actually break out of this illusion, which in Hinduism they call this Maya. It may take a while. There's probably the odd person that probably gets right off the top. I don't know. I don't know how that part works, but it seems that for most people that takes a while, and that could be lifetime after lifetime, and you probably get it after the billionth time. I don't know.
Yeah, because we don't know. We just don't know how many
Tricky.
lives we've done. So did you come across previous lives, Morgan?
I have. I had experiences where I experienced previous lives. Before my awakening, I had a lot of those. I remember being a Cuban baseball player. I remember being a female, a Caucasian female who died at the age of 12. I remember being an older white female who died in probably around the age of 80. I even experienced being in sometime in India where I was a ruler or a prime minister or something of some sort, a gay prime minister or a leader of some sort, and had a lover in the closet. I had it was weird. There was a lover that I had or whatever that I couldn't expose to the public. The list goes on, and you're
Wow.
watching this thing, you're like, what? Yeah, like all these
Yeah,
crazy
you
things
couldn't make it up.
have taken place. I couldn't even, yeah, yeah, just
You couldn't make
weird.
it up. And was there spirituality in any of the previous lives?
Not in those, no. But there've been other experiences where there've been like alternate realities where there are lives that I'm either currently in where they're highly spiritual, some are gurus and things of that sort. But none of the
Okay.
lives that I experienced that looked like they were past lives where it looked like I was spiritual. But I did meet a guy one time. His name was it was a guru. He did a Vedic astrology, Vedic, he did Vedic numerology. And he told me that I have been trying to break through spiritually in certain amount of lifetimes. These lifetimes I don't remember, but he did tell me about a few incidences where the reason why I am today is because of me trying to find ultimate truth within some of these past realities. And he also told me that I'm currently living out more than one reality in this life. Which, when he told it to me, it sounded strange at first. But then, after one of my friends, she had an experience, and in her experience, because she has her father's best friend passed away, and she had an experience where he came back to her in the afterlife, and he told her that he was me. So she was like, "How can that be possible?" Because I know Morgan, and Morgan's not dead. And when she told me the story, I went, "Oh gosh." I remember going to a guy a few years ago telling me that I'm actually two different people on the planet. He just didn't tell me that the other person would have been much older and recently passed away by the time he made contact or quote unquote contact with my friend. And I'm saying this as this is her interpretation of what she experienced. I can't say yay or nay. But when she told me the experience, I
Yeah.
said, well, it falls in line with what this guy was telling me in regards to me being in two lives. Because if you look at it from that astral plane, just say it from an astral plane, whatever it is, my astral body being this astral body deciding to be two people. So now if part of my body splits off and goes into a new reality, even if it's just a second later, in our reality, that could have been 25, 30 years. 30
Yep.
years difference, even though in that reality is probably like a split second. So here I am, I split
Yep.
myself off, I go into this reality, and then my other half of my astral body goes into the reality, and I'm born in this time 30 years later. Who knows? So
Yeah. So okay. So I guess maybe we should give the view. So I'm just imagining people listening now and watching that are probably going, okay, what's going on? There's parallel lives, there's past lives. So I've experienced very similar, right? I had my three previous lives were exposed to me, and I was also shown a parallel life that's going on at the moment. I'm a 13, 14-year-old male in India, young teenage boy. But I mean, what do I do with that, right? It was just I got the information, interesting, but okay, I'm still here in this body, playing out this character. So, so I mean, maybe we'll try and give people an understanding of like how it's working, right? There seems to be like an oversoul, right? Some sort of a greater version of us, and it seems
Yeah,
to kind of want to experience lifetimes through our physical forms. So it seems
yeah,
to divide itself up, right? So it's Morgan, it's Garrett, it's someone else, could be someone on the other side of the planet, and we have a separate consciousness, our own little individual free will, and we're here to learn and become love and awaken to our true nature. Would
yeah.
you agree?
You can call that. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. You can say that maybe that thing. I have a whole theory about this whole thing and about this soul thing. So let's say we call it Atman, just like within
Yeah,
the Hindu tradition, and Atman is made up of many, many, many Atmans. But all the Atmans together are under the unity, God unity, Brahman,
yeah,
all of that. So because Brahman is the whole, and Brahman is trying to create as much experiences that it can possibly can because it has the power to do so, it uses its imagination to break itself up to separate parts. So let's call that Atmans, all right? All these souls. And then each
yeah,
soul decides to let me have this experience in so and so and that experience in so and so. But the thing is about with Brahman and Atman, Brahman is omnipresent and all that, but so is Atman. So Atman is also omnipresent, but it's having the experience of not being omnipresent. So it can be different facets of the same Atman, but in many different instances, timelines, location, planets, solar systems, all that type of stuff. So it gets to play out those roles. So I guess what happens with each of these characters that it's playing, it plays out the roles of what we're doing right now, and so on and so on. But Atman, in my opinion, is not just human souls. There's also animal souls, plant life, insects, microscopic creatures, all of that. You can even get down to
mm,
the point where Atman is not just the form of one human entity. It's made up. I would say that each cell is probably different aspects of Atman too, because each cell lives its life, it dies, you regenerate more cells, and so on and so on. And every time you comb your hair, you shower, you do all these different things, you're killing off cells. You kill off brain cells, you develop more brain cells, and so on and so on and so on. From my standpoint, because this is so really complicated, that all these things are Atman having experience from an individual standpoint of cells or molecules and so on and so on. It's just we interpret reality as itself as this reality that lives from 0 to 75 or to 80 to 100, 113, whatever the case is. But really, it's all the individual cells or the things even beneath that makes up what Atman is trying to do. It's just it gets so complicated that we just interpret it as I am an individual, I am Morgan the human being, not realizing that there are parts of me that dies and is reborn every single day. So even from that standpoint, it's probably going through a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. It's just there's a time where the umbrella of what you may call Morgan or Gareth that passes on to the next life, and everything all starts to regenerate itself and everything from that standpoint over and over and over and over again until you start to realize that all that stuff that you've been doing and all the lives that you've been living is just part of the grand illusion coming from Atman. So one can have the experience of being Atman, and then one can have the experience in their lifetime where they realize that they're Brahman, and then or they can actually have the experience of being para-Brahman and on and on and on and on. So it's there's a lot that can go there. So not realizing the whole time that whatever experience that Atman is having, all of that is also part of Maya. All of that is still part of the illusion. And you haven't even woken up yet. Really, from the standpoint of Atman.
So okay,
So
so
even
I'm just
all
gonna
astral projection and all those things also part of the illusion as well. None of that stuff is even ultimate reality yet. So
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to try and just piece together what you just said, right? Because when you use the phrase Brahman, right? You seem to be talking about God, right? The all omnipresent intelligence, right? Whereas when I talk about Brahman, I talk about the near Brahman, which is the attributeless version of Brahman.
Formless, the formless, no
Yes.
no attributes, blah 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 blah.
So when
Yeah,
you talk about
I use God interchangeable. Yeah, I use it in different ways. So sometimes when I'm talking about God, sometimes I'm just talking about Brahma, and
okay,
then other times I could be talking about Brahman, and then those other times I could be talking about Parabrahman, and so on and so on. So it can get confusing in regards to when using the term God. But in most cases, I can also say that Atman is God coming from an individual standpoint, not from a collective standpoint. So God, you can
so
still
just
say
explain
as a self.
Atman. So just
Atman,
explain.
in a Christian sense, you can call it the soul,
Okay.
or in
So it's
another sense, you can call it the causal body
okay, so it's an individual unit of Brahman that's
of
having an
Brahman.
experience,
Yeah,
okay,
that's
of
having the
God.
experience. Yeah, because Brahman
Okay.
itself is not really having an experience. Brahman is, as you said, the no attributes, no form, no shape, no form, the Nirguna Brahman,
Yeah. Yeah.
ground of all being. Yeah, so it's yeah.
Okay. So we can have the Atman having an incarnation, the soul, right? But still in ignorance. And what falls under that ignorance is our reality, our dream reality, even the astral realms, right? So that Atman can get out of this reality into the astral realms, but still be living in ignorance.
Still be living in. So there'd be like I would say there'd be different levels of this ignorance. So even if you're only stopping at the ethereal or the astral planes, you're still in ignorance. You're just moving away from the core sense of ignorance into more of awareness. Because I know a lot of people who are in the astral plane of consciousness still have no idea of all the stuff that happens after that. And from their standpoint, that's
Yeah.
an absolute. Yeah, so it can keep going, but you're still in ignorance.
Yeah, I totally agree because 2010 I started having out of body experiences, very flashy, you know, amazing journeys and lucid dreams, but I was still totally in ignorance, still identified as the ego, suffering, hadn't yet had that awakening that we're going to get into now. So
Mm.
what do you think? Why does an individual who is living in ignorance, like what ignites that want or that drive to seek truth or liberation and eventually have that shift?
I think from the Atman standpoint, that's what it chooses to do. It plays these games with itself because there's nothing else to do. So it
Yeah.
decides to play these games of being in ignorance and trying to see if it could put itself in the worst case scenarios or the most challenging scenarios to see if it could find a way to break out of it. Because at the end of the day, it can't die, it can't be reborn. None of those things can happen. So no harm can ever come to Atman. So it will put itself in this challenge as much as possible to see if it can break out of it. And if it doesn't break out of it in this lifetime, it tries again in the next lifetime. And it just keeps going and going until you break through.
It really doesn't matter, right? From its
Doesn't even
perspective,
matter. Yeah,
it
from its
doesn't really
perspective,
matter.
it's just a game.
It's just a game. But here,
Just a game.
in the meantime, the individual who's taken on the identity of the character seems to suffer, right? But
That's
every
yeah,
decision, it's a slog, it's hard work. Okay,
yeah.
okay. So let's talk about that first awakening that the Atman starts to go through. Should we talk about witnessing first, or because it seems to be something kind of a prelude to self-realization, at least it was for me, was the sense of, oh, there's something watching. I can sense that there's something in behind my thoughts that's listening. Even as a
Mm-hmm.
kid, I had experience of being, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on the floor and being aware that there was something that was listening to my mind, and I wanted to know what that was. So let's talk about that, Morgan.
Yeah, so I would say that'd be prior to what Buddhists call the stream entry. So prior to that, like what you're saying, I remember being a kid and being in the playpen, and I'm looking around the playpen. I'm looking outside of the playpen and saying to myself, in my from my kid standpoint, that I
Yeah,
wasn't satisfied. Something didn't amuse me. I didn't know what it was at
yeah.
the time, and I only realized this after having the experience going back into my childhood, sitting in the playpen, just looking around, just saying, "Is this it?" This wasn't
This
amusing.
is sh
Didn't
this
smile
is
much.
shit.
Didn't Something about this is not right. I couldn't figure out what it was. And through my whole
Me
life
too.
up to 16 years old, I'm trying to figure out what is this thing? How comes nothing is fulfilling me? How comes I don't feel satisfied? Everything I try, if I have a goal set in mind and I reach that goal, there's no sense of gratification. Well, not a type of gratification that is long term. It's always short term. And it kept going like this over and over and over and over again until you say, you know what, something has to give. So that's the beginning point. We realize that you think there's something there. There's something more that's there, but you don't know what it is. But you decide to go on this journey to find out what that is. And so that you go on this long journey, and then hopefully at some time period, because for me, as I was telling in the last episode, when I met the hypnotherapist and got into meditation and all that stuff, that's where it kind of started for me. But right prior to that, I remember being 30. I was 30 at the time. I was 30 at the time, at a crossroads, really successful in my career because at this point, we had a top TV show in Canada and all this stuff was going really, 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 really well for me. But something didn't fit, something was unsettling. So at that point is when I started to look into like taking and like reading certain books, and I didn't. There was no YouTube or anything yet, so I didn't have access to different spiritual teachers. None of that stuff was apparent yet. But just one thing leading to another. I remember going to see the hypnotherapist and saying to the hypnotherapist, if you can put an affirmation in there where I can become more aware. I don't know what that is, but if I can become more aware of something. So he put that in my hypnotherapy sessions. And then I went from there. And after when I started doing holosync and doing this holosync program every single day, things really, really, really started to change. And then I started to realize that there's something more. And I just kept seeking and kept seeking. So I didn't know what I was looking for the next 5 years. But until, as I was mentioning to you, when I ran into this being, and he brought up Osho, the book Osho, something struck, and I said, "That's whatever that is. That's the thing that I want. I don't know what he's talking about, but that's the thing that I'm looking for." And that's when I started to pursue that. And then a few years later, I was able to break into what you may call, for me, I guess, is different than just stream entry. But you can say that that could be the stream entry when you wake up from the character and you have this glimpse of realization that I am something more than the character. So you may call that, many people may call that the stream entry level.
Or would that be self-realization?
That could be self-realization. It can lead into self-realization because remember, it gets tricky. So one can be in stream entry, and based on your description, may not be in self-realization yet. Right? It depends on the person. For me, I felt that it was like stream entry, self-realization, and God. What did you call it? Consciousness? Is that what you call it, or
Yeah,
God
yeah,
realization, or
yeah.
God consciousness?
Consciousness seeing itself in the outside world.
Seeing
God,
itself in the outside
God
world. I
consciousness.
felt that my
Yeah,
first experience was a combination of those three because it
yeah.
fluctuated. If I'm doing that right, I think it fluctuated where I have knowledge of these three things happening. But it was the first time having that experience, so you can say that stream entry. But of course, within that, I'm having some of the descriptions that you made. I'm having that happening within a period of time.
Just listening to you explaining it, right? I'm sitting here, my head is nodding. I'm just like, yes, totally, totally. I had the very same as a kid, just kind of looking around and going, what am I doing here? Who are these people? Who are my family? Family were nice people, but I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
there was something just didn't feel right to me. I was the very same. I was constantly being
Yeah.
put into like sports clubs and, after school activities, and I hated it all. I just didn't want it. Um, so again, around the same time, you started your awakening. I was around 30 as well when I started going,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I want answers, started having the out of body experiences. Um, Eventually had my awakening at 36. And the very same thing went straight into self-realization, having experiences of God consciousness. Yeah, so all three were kind of there for me straight off the first awakening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was 36 as well when it first happened to me. 2008, I was 36. So that's very interesting.
Very interesting. Yeah, 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 yeah. So, okay, so then the stages. What are we talking? So we go into what's known as self-realization, right? Can we just let's try and describe that for the listeners and the viewers, what
Oh,
self-realization is and what it feels like.
if I'm going to isolate self-realization based on your description, you may not be in God's self but you feel, from my standpoint, you feel very divine, but not necessarily, you may not attach it to God per se or anything like that, but you feel there's a
Yeah.
sense of divinity or an overwhelming sense of divinity. Yet, I would say in this standpoint, you probably feel more human than ever before. You authentically feel human. So in the first time in your life, you actually know what it feels like to be actually human, at least a human that's fully aware of itself. But it's very divine. But you may not attach it to anything that's considered to God. But if someone is talking to you in that instant, in that period of something more divine, you understand it. You can comprehend it. All that stuff you can comprehend, but you may not necessarily find yourself in the sense of Godhead or anything like that yet. But you feel very divine. That's how I kind of see it, where you just become more aware of the self. You realize that the character that you were playing is just a character, and then I'm something that's behind it. It's more divine. So in this state, well, right now, like for most people, the ego is in the forefront and the essence is in the background. But in this state, the essence becomes the forefront and the ego becomes goes into the background. So as this is happening, the self, because when I say ego, I'm just talking about the self, the false self, sees what's happening. It's silence. It's just witnessing what's going on because you still realize that I'm Morgan. All that stuff is still there. But because the essence becomes the forefront, you're like, whoa, that's my true essence. And it's not like you're saying that's because you're not pointing to anything, but because it's now in the forefront, you realize that that's the essence of who you are, at least from that standpoint.
I love that interpretation of it more. That's yeah, beautiful. That's exactly how it was for me. And it feels like the larger self is sort of in at the background, right? And the ego and the identification is here in the foreground. But
Yeah.
something happens where it's almost like the ego, it's unhitched or unhinged. Like basically, it just kind of
Yeah.
feels like that something, an identification with it seems to break. Something
It seems,
snaps.
yeah.
And for me,
Yeah.
it was like I could feel that happening. It was like an instant, and it was like a click or a rip. And it was like, oh, something
Yeah.
has changed. I feel very different. For me, it felt like freedom. It felt like I was no longer like in this tight, confined space. It felt like, oh, I'm spaciousness. I'm free. It felt like I had
Yeah.
taken
Yeah.
off an uncomfortable shoe. And it
Boundless.
really was beautiful. Yeah. But it was just awareness, no divine love, no bliss, just spacious awareness, free. Yeah. But really, really pleasant when you go from identifying as an individual to this state. Would you agree?
I agree, but it gets complicated because you didn't sense that bliss, that love. I did. It was there, but because I had experiences after that that surpassed that level of love and bliss. So in comparison, no, you can say that it wasn't there, but there was a an opening of love and bliss and all that sense. But it's like being in a body bag and just unzipping the body bag and your face pops up, but your face is the true self and it sees itself for the first time. And it's like, oh my gosh, I've been in a body bag the whole time and didn't even realize it. There's a freeness to it, as you're saying. There's a freeness, it's liberation, it's all of that. And if a person only had that experience for the rest of their life, they're good.
Yep.
That itself could be life changing. But you start to realize as you keep on your journey that there's more, much more.
Much more, much more. Um, so just for a little bit of clarity, right? For me, the bliss and the love, it would come, but for me, it was like it would open up. So there was the
Mm,
freedom inside, and then what seemed to be happening was that inner awareness started to look out through my eyes, not always, but it would just like open up when I would go for a walk, and it would be like,
yeah,
oh, I see myself. I'm not just the awareness in here, but I'm everything
yeah,
outside. And that would give me
and
this
everything
sense of
outside.
love and bliss, and it was really beautiful. So we
Yeah,
we have
totally
this
agree. Yeah, yeah,
this experience, right? This freeing sense of unbounded awareness, right? The identification with the ego seems to break or snap in an instant, right? But that
yeah.
doesn't mean that the ego disappears, right? It's still
No,
there,
it's still there.
still there.
Yeah, it's still there. If someone came in the room and said, "Hey, Morgan, can you pass me the glass of water?" I could still do that. Yeah,
Yes.
Morgan's still aware that Morgan, but that essence, difficult to explain, is fully present.
Yeah. So I get a lot of people and they seem to say, they'll go, well, who's there? If you've woken up, who is the individual who, talks about it or talks about the experience. And you're trying to explain, like, well, there is still the essence, like the personality is still here. If somebody calls
Oh
my
yeah.
name, I turn around and answer. I still have my preferences where I might like watching UFC over baseball, something like that.
Hmm.
There's still something, I still have my preferences.
Yeah.
It's very hard to
But
explain
your
that to
essence,
people.
it is
Yeah,
hard to explain because the essence is becomes the witness. There, you can call it the empty witness. You can even call that Turiya. And the empty witness is watching you making these preferences. But the as you're going through it, the essence of who you are is not attached to it. Yet you're going about making choices, making decisions, making preferences with ease. None of that really changes. It's just that part of yourself, which is like the larger self, realizes that it's doing it.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah,
So
very
it's
good.
yeah. It just realizes it's doing it. And it just does that effortlessly.
Yeah. So we have the awakening experience, but we also realize that we still have traumas in our system, right? And the traumas seem to be like we can have this awakening, right? But in order to get to the later stages of awakening, it seems that we need to now clear out a lot of the human garbage and junk that's been accumulated through our life and maybe previous lives, right? So there could be stuff like
Yeah.
trauma stuck in our system, emotions that are there, patterns, beliefs, they all still need to be cleared somehow. So, do you want to
Yeah.
talk a
At
little
least
bit
to a
about
degree.
that? Yeah,
Yeah. At least to a degree. Because as long as you're human,
yeah,
some of these things will always remain. Probably there's no way around it. But what happens is when you're no longer attached to your traumas, that's where it gets really interesting. That's when you realize that you have freedom within this meat body that we're in. But in regards to the traumas, like we're talking about traumas, we're talking about dark shadows, we're talking about a number of different things here. So now that you've gone deeper, for you to reach higher states of consciousness itself, you have to get rid of a certain amount of baggage. So for
yeah,
some people, it may happen prior to their breakthrough, prior to a stream entry. That could happen, even though there's probably much more to go. For other people like myself, even though I did go through some of the purging, a lot of the purging that took place, a lot of the heavier purging happened after the awakening. So after the awakening, because I was saying in the last episode that after the awakening, this thing didn't happen again for another 2 years. And after 2 years, it happened again, and then shortly after it happened again, and it continued to happen. At this point, I now fell into the dark night of the soul. So in the dark night of the soul, you now have to face a lot of the more deeper unresolved unconscious material that you have to clear out, just so that you have more mileage to go in regards to using that energy to reach higher states of consciousness. So if you listen to like Ken Wilber, he talks about that you have to kind of like if you're putting a lot of energy into, and I'm paraphrasing here, but if you put a lot of your energy into a lot of the um, traumas and a lot of the stuff that's holding you back. So I guess for example, if he's talking about the ego, what happens is anytime you go through trauma, the ego splits off. So that part of the ego splits off and it stays, just say something happened to you at 5 years old. That part splits off and it remains 5 years old. So the ego
yeah,
itself may grow up to be 35 years old, 45 years old, 55 years old and on. But if that thing hasn't been dealt with, it stays at the age of 5. And you have to go back to that part of the ego that's still at the age of 5 so it can release this trauma so it can now mature and grow up with the rest of the main ego itself. So we have a lot of those. We have a part of our ego that's stuck at 5, some that's probably stuck at 2, some that was stuck probably prior to before we were born, some that happened at 19, a situation that happened during college, on and on and on. And you have to go back and try to open up or release the traumas of all those things that are happening because you need that energy to push you forward into higher levels of consciousness.
that's I really loved how you explained that, and I would totally agree with that because I've experienced it myself. Right, we with something on the outside world triggers us, right, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I can feel all this coming up, my triggers are coming up, and you kind of sit with it. And what I started to do was I would go, okay, what in me is unresolved, right? Somebody on the outside has triggered me, but what's it really pointing to? And I would find that there was a ribbon that I would start tracing back, and it would always be to something in my childhood, right? This was when I was a child. This is when my mum did something, or my dad did something, and it had nothing to do with the person now, but it had everything to do with what happened to me as that child. And I would have to sit there and send love to the child and try and release that part. And also, this is what happens, right? When we're faced with people, right, that we're in, friendships and relationships with, and we all of a sudden we're faced by this other side of a person where, their trauma has come up, and immediately you're faced with maybe like a child version who doesn't seem anything like the person that we knew, and they're acting out in these ways. It's like, what happened to my friend? They're not no longer there. But you're actually now dealing with a wounded child that hasn't healed. Yeah.
that hasn't healed. Yeah, you got to go back and open that stuff up, and that takes a while. So if one wants to go deeper into consciousness, because again, like meditation itself is a double-edged sword. So as much as meditation has all these great and positive things, it has a shadow side. So every time you go through whatever you need to go through, you may have to deal with the opposite aspect of what that thing is, so you can continue to move forward. So here we are as human beings, going back, like what you're saying. Some of us at this point may try to do some more shadow work. It could be shamanic work, things like that. So to kind of get to that core, to try to see if I can release whatever it is that you can feel it. You can feel that thing. Not that it's holding you back, even though it is, but you can feel that there's something there that's not allowing me to really experience bliss in the way that I should be experiencing bliss, at least on a perpetual basis, right? So you go back, you do that type of healing, you deal with the dark shadows, you deal with the traumas and all that that's happening, so that you can now integrate that and use that, whatever you call that form of energy, to kind of push you forward, because it's kind of like you can only go so far with a certain amount of gas, right? So it's kind of
Mm.
like the same idea. So it's like, what are you going to use to kind of push you forward? So you go back, you deal with all these unresolved stuff, and every time you go back, you find that there's more. And not only are
Mm.
you dealing with some of your stuff, you start to realize that you're also dealing with collective traumas and dark shadows as well. So you kind of start taking that on. So, and as much as that could be very devastating to a lot of people, that too will allow someone to surpass this individual thing that we call Atman and move on to a more of a collective standpoint. So that by not just clearing out your traumas, but also clearing out a lot of the stuff that's happening collectively, it allows you to experience what's happening, at least in reality, from a collective standpoint. So it keeps going and going and going. The more that you're able to take on and clear out, the further you can move up into higher levels of consciousness.
And Morgan, do you feel that the more you work on yourself and release that, it makes it easier for the collective to awaken also?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like the more work that I do, you start to realize that people start popping a lot sooner.
Yes.
It's very
Yes.
interesting how
Yeah.
this happens. You realize this is
You
not
can
just
really
a me journey. This is a we journey.
yeah, you can really see it at the moment though, right? Like Zoom and the way we can all connect. You can see that there's this kind of popcorn effect of people, popping all around the world.
Popping, yeah,
Yeah, very good. Yeah. So
yeah.
the next level I would call unity consciousness, where the
I have
individual
some of
sort
your stuff
of
written down here. Unity consciousness. Okay, yeah.
yeah. So maybe we can kind of bridge your very. No, I heard you talking on the last episode. You had an experience as well, and I was like, oh, that was unity consciousness, and for me that was sort of like the edges dissolved, right? It was like my individual consciousness, right? The edges that house that, the coffee mug, right? We spoke about it. The coffee mug shattered, and my consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of my body and merged into this sort of panoramic scenery, right? It was like, oh, I feel like I'm home no matter where I am. Yeah. So where did that come along for you?
Hmm. There's so many of these experiences. I'm trying to when did I first notice that? Probably, gosh, 2013, maybe 2013. So remember I was talking earlier about the essence that's in the background and then it comes in the
Yeah.
forefront. And then like
Yeah.
what you're saying, the essence now breaks apart. So this
Okay.
individual essence, even though it doesn't feel like an individual thing, because it feels totally whole, but when that
Yeah.
breaks, then you start to realize that I was still in a larger bubble. So that breaks, and then it becomes more expansive, and you start to realize that the merging happens between, if you want to say, my essence versus the essence of everything. So the two starts
Collective.
to merge together. So yeah,
Collective
I would say
consciousness.
that, but it started to happen on and off because even around 2013, I should say, I was still having the previous types of consciousness just at the highest level possible. So I was still exploring a lot of that because I didn't know what was coming next, even though I knew in my mind that there was much more because I could feel it. I can feel
Yeah.
that. So by the time it gets to the point where my essence of who I am, the self, if you want to call it that, experiences the self, and you're like, whoa, there's much more going on here. Yet there's still, in my opinion, there's still the self, the small self, watching this whole thing happen. So it's not even at the point
Mhm.
yet where that fully dissolves. It's still there. You can sense it. It's still there. It's watching the whole thing happen. And you may not notice
Yeah.
that at the time, but after when you have bigger and more transformative experiences, you realize that the self is still there to some degree. It's very interesting. Even though at the time you may
Okay.
look at it, you may even have this terminology is like, oh my gosh, I was everything. I was this, I was that, I was this, I was that. But there's an I that's experiencing this everything. So I
Exactly.
haven't reached that point yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we take the metaphor of it being like a bubble, right? We have the edges that can dissolve, but there's still a nucleus at the center, which seems to be that the I-ness. And the
The
I still
I-ness,
hadn't
nucleus.
dissolved for me in unity consciousness. So a couple of
Yeah.
weeks
And it's
later,
having the experience of this thing. Yeah.
yes. So a couple of weeks later, for me, I had the experience of the I dropping back down into the heart and dissolving. And then it was like, I don't know if you've come across what they call Sahaja Samadhi. It was like I was just now meditation. There was no center. I was just like, wow, it's just like it felt like the desire to meditate was gone. It was just like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah,
For me, I never had the desire to not meditate because I haven't missed a day since 2000 and, or whenever I started, when I was 20, when I was 31. I've never missed a day. So that has never gone away in regards to that. I always put in my hour. But in 2010, I was running a workshop with a group of my young guys who I still work with till today. And sitting there in the room, it was an after school program. I was sitting there in the room because outside of this, I'm also a youth worker. I work with kids in my community. I work with the marginalized families and things of that sort. So I'm sitting in the room and I'm explaining vortex-based mathematics to them. And I'm sitting there and something just dropped. I went, what the hell was that? It just dropped and I ended up in a meditative state. This thing that you're talking about, that meditative state happened. And until this very day, this meditative state is still there. We're now
yeah.
2024. That meditative state is still there. But I remember the moment it happened. It happened on the Thursday after 4 o'clock. I'm sitting there talking to my guys. There was about six of them at the time. And I just went, as I'm talking, I just went, whoa, that dropped. I can't explain what it is. It's very subtle, but that's when I realized that I was in a meditative state, that I realized at that moment that I didn't need to meditate ever again
Yeah.
from that standpoint.
Yeah.
I still do it because I just enjoy doing it. But at that point, I realized, oh gosh, I'm now in that meditative state that I've been striving for. Things took place after that, but that was the moment where it happened. Very subtle thing. There was nothing extravagant, nothing like that. It's just a drop. And I've been
Yeah.
there ever since.
So would you say that's the awareness dropping down into the heart? So again, after last week's podcast, we were texting a little bit and you text me and you were like, "Oh, I heard you talking about the head, the heart, and the gut." Would you say that was what was happening? The awakening was happening on the three centers?
Not yet. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that was probably more of the head. The heart, the heart part I experienced in two different ways. I experienced one of those type of things as bliss, as absolute
Yeah,
bliss. But again, like what you're saying, that's not the awakening. That's
yeah,
just you having an experience of bliss. Later on, though, I was on the Saturday. I was with a friend of mine, and that's when I experienced the heart, the awareness dropping into the heart, and that's when I went, "Oh my Lord, what the hell is this? I've never experienced anything like that in my life." But I had the full awareness of this awakening out of my head, but now in the heart center. And it's
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's really literally feeling God's love in that center when you had the love for absolutely everything in the universe. But it's an awareness of how much I love myself, but not as my Morgan self, but as a universe or as unity itself. It's very interesting how that works. But that was years later. So that was now around, gosh, when did that happen? That happened 2000 and I'm losing time now. 2000. That was nine
sure,
years ago. Yeah, that was 9 years
yeah,
ago. I remember. Yeah, there was someone who I had a couple of friends who I was hanging out with a lot during that time. So that was in 2015. when I experienced that for the first time.
Okay. And would you say that that brought on the fullness of the awakening?
At the time, that's how it feels. It feels like it brings on the fullness of the awakening, and then you realize there's more.
Yeah.
So yeah, at the time, you can stop me at any time. I'd be like, I'm good. I don't need anything
Yeah.
else after this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
But it continues on. So at the time, I would say yes. Now, when I'm looking back at it, no, more to
Yeah.
go.
More to go. More to go. So
Yeah.
so Kundalini is also probably active at this stage, right?
Well, Kundalini is active from the I can sense Kundalini happening from the very beginning, from when it started. Because there's a lot of stuff that I didn't talk about in the last episode that took place during that time period where I had to do some research to find out what this Kundalini thing was. Because I heard the word before, but I didn't know what it was. And when I started looking up what was going on with Kundalini activation, I said, "Oh gosh, so that's what was happening when I first started with the meditations. I was experiencing the activation of Kundalini, and if I could do a whole other episode on that alone." Or I'm going through the ups and downs of this Kundalini activation and all the stuff that it does and all of that. So all this throughout this whole time, Kundalini is being activated. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So the stages we're talking about, they're the kind of perceptual shifts in consciousness, right? And from my perspective, right, it seems to be like that the soul is retracing its steps back, right? It's not, there's no attainment in any of these shifts, but it seems to be more of a remembering, right? It's a remembering, stepping
Mm-hmm.
back into these stages. Now, the human aspect needs to go undergo like a rewiring. Our nervous system has to be
Rewiring
rewired, and that seems to be
nervous
this
system.
energetic essence at the base of our spine. It starts to rise up through the chakras, purify our
Yep.
system, and it seems
Yeah.
very
Remove all
organic
those
and very
blockages.
pleasurable. Yeah, yeah. So that seems to be
And
kind of
painful
going
too.
on, and painful, right?
and
Yeah, yeah,
and painful
painful.
too. Oh yeah. I've had moments, so many moments of the physical discomfort and pain that came along with that. So as much as I had so many blissful and pleasurable moments. I was also hit with a lot of the pain and suffering that came along with that. So some of that would be a lot of the mental stuff, emotional purging, mental purging, physical purging. So you can feel the purging happening within the nervous system, within the nerves itself, within the meridians, and even down to the nadis. All that stuff has to purge. You're purging all that what they call karmic goop out of the system. And you can feel that. It comes out in different ways. It may come out in rashes. It may come out in types of pains like kidney pains, rapid heartbeats. So many different things can happen. Sweating, because you may feel really, really hot, or you may feel really, really, really cold. So there are moments where
Yeah,
I can go out in the dead winter, didn't matter how cold it was, and I'll be sweating outside in the cold. And we have cold winters here. I'd be sweating in the
yeah,
cold, no coat. I can walk out with no shoes on, no socks on, nothing. I probably can even melt the snow at this point. And that went on for about at its extreme, at its peak, it probably went on for about 2, 3 years. It
mm.
still happens now, but during that time period, sweating in the wintertime, all that stuff is happening. And people was like, "Why are you sweating?" I'm like, "I don't even know what's happening to my system right now because I can't go into the whole meditation. No one's going to understand it." So I'm just like, "Oh, I got to go see the doctor and get it treated. Something's going on with my system." It's like, "Oh, yeah, aging, right?" Like, yeah, it just comes with age. The whole time, I can tell that it's all Kundalini activation and stuff and purging that's happening in the process throughout the process. So yeah, very intriguing because I found the whole thing intriguing, but at the same time, a lot of painful experiences, especially with the mental and the emotional parts. There's times where I can feel anger coming on for no reason, and I have to leave my place of work temporarily just so I can get myself back into a nice balanced state and so I can enter back into the work field. So many things have happened where just the smallest trigger can set me off, and I'm like, I have to leave. I just know to leave. I got to leave, calm myself down and come
Yeah.
back into the environment.
Oh, okay, I think that's very important, right? That we discuss this as well, right? Because people seem to have this sort of, vision of what a person going through an awakening should be, right? They shouldn't express anger, they shouldn't, get upset or be reactive, and that's not true, and if they do express them sort of emotions, will they say, well, who's the one that's angry, or they get all this neo Advaita kind of,
You know,
well, you're in a human body, right?
you're in a human body, still going to go through human experiences. All this stuff is still going to take place. And what people need to realize too is that because you are human and you have all these different types of impulses, so many things come up into play. So even over sexual impulses comes up.
Yeah,
Sometimes your sexual impulses are totally numb. All these things can happen. So when someone's watching a person who's waking up saying, this person claims that they're doing all this meditation and trying to do A, B, and C, why are they like this? They're not realizing the person's actually purging.
Yeah. So
Yeah, but on different
like,
levels: physical, mental, sexual,
yeah.
emotional. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is really important to let people know this, right? It's because, you know, they might be having something coming up, they might be reactive, and then, people close to them might be saying, well, you're going through an awakening, or you're in a certain stage of, enlightenment. That shouldn't be happening. But it does seem to happen, and you can't just switch that off all of a sudden.
This is not for most of us, no. There may be the odd person who can get through this smoothly, but for the most of us, no. And the thing is, what people have to realize that when we're looking at some of these spiritual gurus and things of that sort, when you look at them and they're going through the same thing as well, and we say, but they're spiritual gurus, they should be better than that. They're not realizing that those gurus may not be at the highest level of consciousness yet.
Yeah.
They're probably just at
Yeah.
the point that where people can identify as this is what we call quote unquote enlightenment, but they're still going through the process. So every time they go up at a different stage, they have to purge whatever's happening at that stage
Yeah.
because you can't escape this. So any shadows that you have will expose itself. So no matter how you try to run, no matter how you try to hide, it will expose itself, and all the stuff that you had buried inside will come up to the surface, and you have to deal with them accordingly.
And it will most likely be reflected back to them in the form of the students that they work with, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's very true. So people have to be aware of all these things, but only because we don't have that education. When we look at someone who's supposed to be an advanced human being, we're quick to scrutinize and quick to criticize, not realizing that that person is still trying to evolve. So we have to be mindful of that. And also, when you're talking about the students as well, they may attract students who are attracted to the guru because that's their dark shadow.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah,
So
very interesting. Yeah.
if they're with a guru who is now expressing a lot of, let's say, emotional abuse, right? That could happen because you hear about this stuff. A guru who's expressing
Yeah.
emotional abuse, you go back to the student, that's the student's dark shadow. And the student's attracted to the guru because, again, unconsciously, we're attracted to the very essence of our own dark shadows because the guru is expressing that, and that's what it gravitates us to that certain type of guru. So a person just has to be aware of that when they go and they start to follow a guru of some sort, that you may just be projecting your own stuff onto that guru. The guru does have those qualities, but if you don't look within yourself and you see it within the guru, that's fine because you can see it within the guru. That's a level of awareness that's happening. But what you're actually also seeing is a reflection of yourself, a projection of yourself that needs to be looked at and become aware of so that you can release those shadows as well. So in that sense, the guru as a teacher can never be wrong in that sense. The guru is doing wrong. But in that sense, the guru still becomes a
Yeah.
teacher because the guru is also still pointing out, unconsciously pointing out the very shadow that you need to face and let go of and all that. So all that stuff is important for anyone who choose that path of
Yeah.
following a guru of any sort, a guru or a spiritual teacher.
Yeah. I think that's
You
very
won't
important
find
as well.
I don't think you'll find a single guru that is perfect. Everyone's got
Yeah.
something. Yep, some people are more advanced than others, of course. But just like how we have technology, yeah, we may have AI, and AI is a better form of whatever that we're using in the past. But AI still has its errors. It still makes mistakes.
Not
You can look at it the
perfect.
same way. All right. So yeah.
Yeah.
So
And then,
don't put everything into the guru. Just use the guru as a guide, not just as a guide in the positive sense, but also use the guru in the negative sense because it points out your own stuff as well.
yeah. And what I would also say is, right, that everything is within us, even the guru, right? The
Yep.
guru's just shown us what is unresolved in us. Same way the person on the outside that triggers something, it's not about the person out there, right? That person exists within our consciousness. And it's just a
Yeah.
reflection of what's unresolved. Same way
Yeah.
if we experience love, right? If we meet people who are loving and we have beautiful relationships, that's a reflection of how we are on the inside. So I
That's
think what
right.
happens is our outside world starts to reflect how our inner world is. And if we're healed on the inside, our outside world starts to change to reflect that back to us. So yeah, very, very
Reflect that back to us.
important. Yeah.
Yeah. Because this is not a me thing anymore. This is now the subjective merging with the objective, and that's an ongoing process until you start to realize that, oh gosh, when I realize that I am everything, It's not just the good, it's also the negative, that I am everything. And if you are everything, and you really know at this point that you are everything, you will express everything, but in this purest form. It has to be expressed. And so that now at this point, now that everything's being expressed, when you do see someone go wrong, there's less judgment within you because you understand at this level, you being everything, that that's part of the process as well. You can't have the good
Hmm.
without the bad. It's like watching a show that's all positive. There's no, if you watch a show that's all positive, it's not a good show. For it to work, it has to have its opposing stuff within that show. That's why we find it interesting. And the only reason why we find it interesting because the very thing that we're watching is within us. That's why we can find the beauty in comedy or find the beauty in drama or action, sci-fi, and all that stuff because it's the same stuff as you're saying is within us. And we're watching it being displayed in front of us. And the only reason why we recognize it because it's within us. If it wasn't within us, we could not recognize it. Right. So all this stuff
Very
comes into
true.
play. So when you see everything that's happening, you realize when you see from that standpoint, you start to realize the beauty in that, and you realize that, gosh, I am creating this. I'm creating this from the inside out, the outside in, everything. This is me. And all this is creation. Now, if you take everything, you start to separate them and divide them, things look bad and things look good and all that type of stuff. But when you see it as an absolute whole, you see the beauty and the perfection and all of that. And a person has to experience that directly. It can't even be told to you. You have to experience that directly. Why there's beauty in that. I'm not saying people should be going out and doing bad things,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's just what happens. And you can see the beauty on all that. And you realize that I am the one that's doing all that. Not me as Morgan, not me as Gareth, but the absolute is playing this out perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Okay. Okay. So we've come up to unity consciousness, and what you would call Sahaja Samadhi, the dropping away of the I. And
Dropping
that's what
away
I
of
would
the I.
that's what you would really kind of consider as like full self-realization, right? Fully realized,
Fully
integrated,
realized,
embodied.
integrated.
Yeah. Yeah. But still within creation, right?
Still
You're
within
still in that
creation.
bubble
There's
of
still,
creation.
yeah. Yeah, it's still
Okay.
in creation, so you're probably still in the. I guess you can break down in the causal body, if I have that correct, in the causal body, because you're still watching things unfold, and you're still in creation, and you're a part of that. So it takes even more to realize that even that can go away. You can have a
Okay. So
realization that
what
not even that is happening. That's also a subtler level of this illusion that we're in.
Okay, so do we want to talk about that? Going beyond creation.
We could try, sure. We
Yeah,
can
yeah,
make
yeah.
the
Because
attempt.
yeah, sure, sure. So, I mean,
Yeah,
do you want me to start on my experience on what that was like?
sure. Oh yeah,
So,
and see if
so
I can
yeah. Okay, so
relate to it. Yeah.
I was being pulled into samadhi every day, pulled into meditation. I could feel myself getting to the edge of something. I didn't know what this something was, but I was kind of getting to the edge. I was disappearing in meditation over and over and over again every day. And then one day I got to this, it felt like I was stood on the edge of an abyss, nothingness, complete black void, scary. And I felt like what was going to happen if I went into it, that I was now going to be erased or deleted. Like, not just die, I was going to be just wiped out. Nothing, no anything. And something
Yeah.
in me
Ego
knew
death.
that I had to go into it. So I went, little bit of fear going in, a little bit of terror, just experienced just as I was going, and then I was gone. No me, no world, no up, down, color, nothing.
No,
I was gone,
nothing.
didn't
Yep.
exist. Eventually, I came back after about 90 minutes, 2 hours, and it was like, what has happened? I don't know where I was. I have no clue. I didn't particularly like the experience. I was a bit kind of like, I don't want that to happen again. But now all of a sudden, I was different. I had this feeling that I was now somehow here, and part of me was almost like floating outside of the spaceship looking in. Um, and the feeling that I got was that anything I looked at, if I went up to the edges and I could lift behind a curtain, I knew that in behind there was that black abyss, and everything I was seeing was painted on that screen of nothingness. And it would only appear when I would look at it, and when I would turn away, it would crumble or disappear. And I just felt like I had somehow broken the human. I was no longer human. I felt like I was no longer accumulating karma. That was another thing. It felt like I had now broken away from this karmic wheel. And I didn't know how I knew that, but I just somehow sensed it that I was no longer accumulating karma. And it felt like I was somehow partitioned outside of creation, here and there at the same time, simultaneously. Did that come up for you?
Not like that. Not like that. The beginning part, yes. For me, because now at this point, I'm doing the 5-MeO sessions. So this is back in 2018. So what would always happen is there's a bright, bright light. So you see this light. It's the most brightest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Just this white, 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 bright light. I enter the bright light. I merge with the bright light. So I now become the light. And then somehow this light becomes this ocean. You may call it the ocean of consciousness. And then I realize I'm this ocean of consciousness. And as I'm this ocean of consciousness, the I self, start to dissolve within that consciousness
Yep.
until all there is consciousness. And then that goes away. And then now there's this void, if you want to call it that, sunyata, if you want to call it that. And I can't explain it from that point on. It's just this void. There's
Yeah.
no pain, no suffering, no happiness, no
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's no me there. I can't. That's why I can't go any further because there's no me to even explain anything past
Yeah.
that point. But I just know that whatever sense that I ever had, whatever sense of I that I ever had in the past, and all the experiences that I had prior to that, where there's still a sense of I, that was gone. When I come back now, it's the fright because it's not frightening within the experience. It's frightening for me
Yes.
afterwards. The
Yes.
post awakening, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I died. Ah, right? And that's what, and you're in a sense of stuck. You're stuck in a sense of in a state of trauma for a while because you
Yeah.
really feel like you really felt like you died because there is no sense of me there. And the idea of that ever happening again, my heart will start to race because I'm like,
Yes.
ah,
It's an
but it's
NDE,
so
Morgan,
profound.
right? It's a near death
For
experience.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
near death experience for sure based on the accounts that I've heard. I was like, yeah, it's an ego death and you can wake up like for me waking up in cold sweat just from that experience alone even though I don't remember the what happens after that point, but like even though I say I don't remember it, it's like everything is happening but I can't explain it in any way shape or form. You just know that when you come back, it seems to be the most frightening thing you've ever gone through, but I'm glad that I did it.
Yeah. Same for me. Very same for me.
Yeah.
The yours seemed to happen a little bit different, right, than for me. So I
Yeah.
had that experience of the Nirguna Brahman, and then the next night I sat to meditate, and I got pulled into the light. But the light for me was a cyan blue. It opened up like a little blue pearl, and then I was pulled into it, and then I was for a moment an individual looking at this ocean of pure potential, bliss, cyan blue, sparkling, and I was like, wow. And then I became it. I merged with it. I kind of became. It felt like
Mm-hmm.
I had merged with the mind of God, and the mind of God was now me, and I was able to consciously think about the individual Garrett who was down in creation, who was supposedly going through these stages of awakening, right? And to me, that
Yeah.
seemed really hilarious that there was an individual in creation thinking that it was somehow realized in any way, right? Because all there was this mind of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
This cosmic mind. Yeah. And it becomes a joke when you even when the past experiences when you realize that you're awakening. And for me anyway, and all those awakenings that I looked at as being awakening became a joke because it's like that was also part of the act as well. It still
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And this is one of the things that kind of I get amused by, right? That people they have these judgments on people who have had realizations, right? And they seem to think that it's the individual who's, at a certain stage, right? And they can
yeah.
say, well, oh, I don't think he's that, maybe he's this, and the individual doesn't get anything out of awakening, right? There's
There's
just
nothing in it for the individual. Yeah,
no, no. And when you actually go through it, you don't care about the stages of awakening. You don't care about spirituality. You don't make judgments on someone else's state. You don't go like I could never look at you and go, nah, I don't think he's here. I don't think he's You know, it's just,
It's so true. Yeah. 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 It
yeah,
has nothing to do with you. And this is the part no one understands. This has nothing to do with you. This is about the essence of itself waking up to itself. Right?
yes,
Nothing to
yeah,
do with you
yeah,
whatsoever. But it's hard to get that across to people because they think that the individual itself has to change and evolve and all these things happen. So when someone says, well, you're not, I don't know, you're not Paramahamsa Vishwananda. And my thing is, the essence that's playing Paramahamsa Vishwananda is playing the character of
yep,
Paramahamsa Vishwananda.
yep,
Paramahamsa Vishwananda isn't that's that's one of the many avatars that it plays.
yep,
So you got to come to the
including
realization that
Morgan,
everything that you see
right?
is just avatars.
Yeah, avatars. We're all
Yeah.
avatars on some level,
All
right? You know,
avatars. Yeah.
yeah,
We can't all
totally.
be a spiritual guru.
Yeah,
Someone's got to be a bus driver. Someone's got to do this, and someone's got to be a teacher, and someone's got to be the professor, and someone's got to be the engineer and the scientist and the physicist, and so on and so on. You can just become awakened to that and realize that everything that's happening within that are the avatars that are happening because of this multidimensional cosmic mind that has the creativity and the imagination to do whatever it chooses. It does that, and it wants to experience all things that's possible within that, which is it, all things are possible, and it chooses to do that. And so it may play. So this is not what we're calling Saguna Brahman, where all the stuff that we
yes,
see, the beauty of nature and all that stuff is Saguna Brahman. So one can experience that. So Nirguna Brahman is creating Saguna Brahman, even though it's not really creating anything,
yep,
because they're both one and the same, just from different aspects. And you may
yep,
see one over the other, or you may get to the realization that you probably speak on later on, where those two merges too, where you're experiencing Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman at the same time. And then you start to get the idea of the formlessness and the form and how they are one with each other, all of that. So it's
And would you call that para Brahman? Is that what you would call the para Brahman stage, where the two sort of merge?
well, Para Brahman to me is very similar to Nirguna Brahman from that stage. It's just you experiencing the Guna Brahma from the to its total opposite, to its total ultimate, in a sense. So one can experience Saguna Brahman to his total to his fullness. Because I was going to ask you, when you talk about Brahman consciousness, are you talking about Saguna or are you talking about Nirguna?
Nirguna,
Nirguna. So
Nirguna.
because
Yeah,
it could.
yeah,
Right, so in your case, you're talking about that, where someone can actually have the full experience of Saguna and never have a touch of Nirguna yet, and
yeah,
that could happen. So when you experience Nirguna Brahman, like what you're speaking of, you look at it and say, "Oh my gosh, this is totally different than what someone would call Saguna Brahman," and how they're
yeah,
different, but there's still the essence of the enlightenment is the same. When you feel enlightenment, you know it's it.
yeah.
That is always seems to be the same, but you see how drastically different Naguna Brahman is from Saguna Brahman when you experience the form and all the attributes versus feeling no form and no attributes.
Yes. So it's like you go from the attributeless version of God to the God realization. It's almost like God is looking out through your eyes. You feel the love, you can feel the essence, that it's like a shimmering light that sort of seems to be animating everything. You can kind of feel that and sense it in everything. But there seems to be something else. There's another aspect, right? So at the top, I discovered that there was a kind of a triad, right? There was the Nirguna,
Mm-hmm.
then there was like what you would call the essence of God, the mind of God, and then from the mind of God, there was the mother, right? There was the she was the one that was creating all of the realities. So so and again, this is my limited model, right? So I
Yeah.
understood that I was both part of the Brahman, that non-existence, right? That was my soul, and then my beingness was part of like a spark of God, that blue cyan light, right? I had both of them aspects, right? But then there was another form or formless form that was an intelligence that was creating the realities for us to experience in. And that came as the form of the Divine Mother, this ruthless, loving, all powerful, pervading Shakti supercomputer.
Oh
And
yeah.
she had all the power, more than God. She was she was the typhoons, she was the natural disasters, she was the babies been born, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh gosh,
I
yes,
had an
yes,
experience with her as well. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, from my standpoint, I just saw it. I see it as the feminine aspect of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily if it was more powerful or anything. It just looked like it just had a different role play.
Yes.
So when that shift for me is like, oh, this is the love because I never even called it mother. What did I even call? What did I call it? I think I just called it Mother Nature or something, like Mother Nature or something. I didn't know
Yeah.
what to call it, but I can feel in this state anyway. I can feel myself being born, not just me. I can feel the birth of everything, of everyone. I can feel the
Yep.
birth of
Yep.
universes, the birth of solar systems,
Yeah.
the birth of galaxies. I can feel the birth of plants and how they bloom out of from the seed. I can feel conception of conception where it becomes the fetus, and then I can feel the
Yeah.
babies actually being born, the grossness and the beauty of it all. All that stuff is happening. It's so graceful. The very ickiness, the very what we call gross, has a beauty in it that when it's experienced, you really get to understand the love of this mother. It's very hard to explain because it's not an individual like a love for a mom for
Yeah.
a child. It's like everything is caring for everything. You can feel the birth and the rebirth of the universe itself. So as we were talking earlier about birth, death, and rebirth, but that's up the individual. You can actually feel the birth, death, and rebirth of the universe itself. You can feel the pain and the pleasure that this mother energy is experiencing in this
Yeah.
moment. So as it's
Yeah.
giving birth, it gives birth, it dies to itself, it borns to itself, reborns to itself, gives birth, dies to itself, reborn into itself consistently. And this thing loves itself so much to the point that it's willing to do that out of sacrifice for its own self.
Incredible.
Absolutely amazing. So from that
Yeah.
standpoint, yes, it's greater than
Yeah.
when you experience this ultimate mother's love from that standpoint. Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But after a while, it's like I don't. They're just different aspects of this same thing. But it's so beautiful and so graceful to have that experience to actually get to know what it's like to really care and to nurture and to destroy the
Destroy.
very thing
Yeah.
that you are. Yeah, because knowing that when I destroy this, it just comes back into rebirth again. But I'm not destroying something else. I'm destroying myself into myself, birthing myself back into destruction, back into creation over and over and over again. So you
Yeah.
start to realize that it's a cycle of renewal that never ends.
So when I listen to you talk about that and describe it, every cell of my body is like, yes, he has experienced it. He knows
Oh,
exactly.
I've done that.
You,
So
you
gosh, yeah,
could not make that up because mine was the very same. It was like the mother, right? She basically merged with me, right? And she
yeah,
experienced herself through my form. So
mm,
I was now having the experience of her. She was experiencing herself through me, and she was birthing galaxies through every cell
oh,
of my body, exploding, bliss
hmm,
rippling through every cell of my body. It felt like it was going to destroy me. And it was like going
yeah,
off, boom, boom, galaxy, galaxy, galaxies crumbling, like
yeah,
death, dying, coming back into
yeah,
existence.
yeah,
Every animal
yep,
being born,
yep.
me begging her to stop, pleading with her, please, you're killing me. I
You're
felt like
killing
I
me
was going to be destroyed. You're killing me. It's like you're making love to me and killing me over and over and over again at the same time,
at the same
simultaneously
time.
in
Yep,
every single cell of my body.
yep. It's birth, it's death, it's sex, it's
Yep.
gosh,
Orgasm to the most
it's
incredible, like
orgasm,
nothing you've
it's
never experienced.
all yeah, it's all pain, all pleasure, but you're
Yeah.
experiencing it simultaneously. So it doesn't feel like just pain.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like just pleasure. It's happening simultaneously and it has its own sense of something. So you can feel yourself destroying yourself and giving birth to yourself,
Yeah.
having sex with yourself, to itself,
Yeah.
for itself, by itself.
Yeah.
It's gross, it's disgusting, and at the same time, it's everything that's divine at the same time. It's like devil and God merging with each other. It's an amalgamation of this thing. I can't even, and it's just gross. Yet I couldn't have it any other way. Yeah.
And Morgan, right, when we talk about the mother, right, so many people, they have this picture of, Mary or, one of the
Something, yeah.
goddesses, right? To me, she
Archetypes.
didn't feel like that. She felt like a Tyrannosaurus Rex that could just like destroy me in an instant. Now, she was beautiful and caring at the same time, but also she had that quality to her where she could just
Yeah,
like
very
just
destructive.
very destructive.
Yeah. And feels everything. Everything that's
Feels
happening, mother
feels
feels it
she
all
feels
and
everything.
does it all out of love.
All out of love. And the funny thing was, Morgan, after nothing compared to what she was, nothing, the individual having the realizations and living in, so-called bliss, it's infinitesimal to what she is. Like
Oh gosh.
minuscule,
Oh yeah.
like an
Oh yeah.
ant compared to the Empire State Building.
It will make a Nazi drop to his knees. To be dead
Yeah,
honest with you, it will make a Nazi drop to his knees when having that experience to realize the love that it has for its own creation, which is itself. It's absolutely miraculous. That alone is enough. You don't even need anything after that or the other
yeah,
stages prior to that. That alone is enough just to have that experience to have that experience of this love, this unlimited amount of ultimate love. I don't even know how to describe it. I don't even know how to
yeah,
describe it. I just know that I don't care how tough you are as a human being,
yeah,
it will make you crumble. Yeah,
yeah,
it'll just make you crumble. I don't care who you are. When you experience, like you experience, when you experience the conception of a not just one individual entity, but all entities in this sense. That even till now, if I look at any YouTube thing with an animal of any sort, if I see grass, if I see flowers is blooming, I start to melt. I'm not showing this to anyone, but I can feel in my heart. I'm like, oh, this is really touching me at the moment because there's something about the essence and the innocence of something being formed into whatever it forms into, even if it becomes the most devious and the most evil thing
yeah,
on the planet. But it started off from something. It came started from something very innocent, and it became whatever it was supposed to do, so it can fulfill its purpose. And when you see it from that standpoint, and you're not taking it out of context, it can be the most beautiful thing, and you start to realize why the Earth and why the universe is the way it is. So as much as all this bad stuff is happening, it's easy for me to say because it's not like I'm stuck in a war zone or anything right now at this moment. But there's another facet of me that is stuck in a war zone right now at this very moment. And if you're having this experience, you can actually feel yourself going through the experience. Because like in my experience, prior to the mother opening up, I can feel the the atrocities of everything. I've watched myself being lynched. I've watched myself being burned to the stake. I watched myself being assassinated. I've watched myself being aborted as a new being coming into the womb. I've watched myself being aborted. I've watched myself being raped, molested. I've watched myself go through all these things. But on the flip side of that, you get to experience the absolute opposite of it. And when you put it all
yeah,
together, you see the beauty of all things, the beauty and the ugliness of all things. It just has to be seen together. It's just like hot and cold water doesn't feel like warm water. Warm water has its own essence. So when you put all these things together, you're feeling the essence of everything put together, why it's so beautiful. I'm not condoning anything bad or anything like that. It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
that's just this is just how it is. So you get to experience that at its core from the lovingness of this mother that is giving birth to itself, dying to itself, destroying itself, creating itself simultaneously. The most beautiful thing that a human being, one of the most beautiful things a human being can experience.
yeah, yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. I mean,
Oh yeah,
where do we go from there? I think we've probably come to the end
peace.
of our conversation.
and
Yeah, amazing. And I'm
you didn't
so
even you
glad
didn't even
we
hit you didn't even hit Krishna consciousness yet. So
well, maybe we'll do a part three and we'll talk about Krishna
yeah, because
consciousness.
that's yeah, the
Incredible.
most beautiful thing. The most beautiful thing. I'm glad that for whatever reason that got me to this point to even try to explore that. I'm glad I did. I had such a great life, especially after the age of 31. My life after the age 31 is so grand and so amazing and so miraculous and so everything that I wouldn't exchange it for the world unless it's another individual like yourself. I get to experience it through you or through a few other people who I've met. But I've had an extraordinary life, and it seems like there's still more to go. And even after when I pass, and I merge completely with with Power Brahman whenever that happens whatever that took place in this lifetime as Morgan, I wouldn't exchange it for the world, because in my experiences, I realized why I had to go through everything I had to go through, whether it's through racism and poverty and all the other stuff that I had to go through in this lifetime. It was all worth it when you see it from that standpoint. It's just,
Mhm.
I wouldn't exchange it for anything.
That's fabulous. Amazing. I'm so happy we had this conversation. I mean,
Oh, me too.
yeah, oh,
You can't find too
this is
many people to have
brilliant.
this conversation with, so
Well, and the beauty is that it's been recorded, right? And it's now going to be shared with people for other people who are going through it. They might come across
that's
this
right.
conversation
Yeah,
and now they have a roadmap. Oh, well, this
now
is
they have a
what's
roadmap.
happening. This is why I'm feeling this way. So this is
Yeah.
the beauty of it. This is the magic. Yeah, I'm very happy that we did this. Morgan, thank you again for being an amazing guest. Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate this. Yeah,
It's been
I
great.
just to have that conversation to express and to talk about these different, because when you have the conversation with regular people, they say, I think you just gone mad. But
Yeah.
if that's what it is, I fully accept that too, because
Yeah,
I
me
rather
too.
be this than to be uh locked up in the matrix. So I prefer this. Yeah, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call this. Divine
Yeah.
madness.
Thank you. Divine Madness, Morgan. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the viewers and listeners. Yeah, until the next time. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Thank you, Morgan. Bye bye.
This has been the Endless Possibilities Podcast, where the journey of spiritual awakening and energy healing unfolds. Garrett is a lifelong seeker of truth, a spiritual teacher and author, and it's his passion to delve into the profound world of consciousness. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten something from it. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, the podcast is available on YouTube and all the major podcasting platforms. Find us on Instagram at _mother_force. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Endless Possibilities Podcast.